Hi guys, this is Marsh. Welcome to my studio here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Today I'm going to be doing a walkthrough for my track Lost in You. I'm going to be looking over the different synths I've used, the different drums, the way I've arranged it, different mixing techniques, as much as I can sort of cover as I run through the project with you. So let's jump straight into it. I thought it'd be really interesting to start this walkthrough by looking at where Saved Me began. Lost in You. Lost in You was initially called Saved Me. It was a track I sent to Anjunadeep back in 2017, along with a handful of demos, including Soul and Black Mountain. The initial draft, as you'll hear, had some nice ideas, had some nice potential, but it wasn't quite ready to be signed, I don't think, and it wasn't until I was preparing for my 2019 Prague set that I stumbled back across this project and decided to open it back up and to sort of spice it up a bit, make it a bit more dance friendly, so that it'd be ready to test out in the Prague set. So I thought it'd be interesting to start with the initial project, which was called Save Me, and show you some of the different elements that I scrapped and some of the elements that made it into the final revision that you are familiar with today. So let's go for it. So the track is built around this, the original idea was built around this main chord progression with this electric piano. Let's put my headphones on so I can hear it. The original track used the sort of electric piano sound from Absinthe, a sound that I actually used in a track called Me and You on my 2017 artist album, Life on the Shore. So obviously these chords made it through to the final draft, but I've used them more exclusively in both breakdown sections of the track. Let's play a little bit of this actually. So here we go. So yeah, there's probably lots of elements that you can recognise from the draft that is released today. For example, this swirling pad has made it through to the final version. This guy was built in in Alchemy. We've obviously got the electric piano. Those guys made it through. These pads, I think just the notes went through. Really simple chord progression there. Nice sustaining note at the top, just droning out those chords. And nothing special with the chords really, but I used more of a trancey pad for that in the new version, which we'll come to. This arpeggio comes in a bit later in this original version. It's made with Silent, and that's made it through to the final version. So I mean, it was quite a chilled version. 120 BPM, the new one's 122. I liked it a lot for quite a long time, but I just felt that it needed to be a bit more clubby to fit the sets better. So hence why I updated it. So let's go straight over to that new version. All right, so this is Lost in You, the new version project. Cool. So the new project is open. So just a quick interesting point, really. I made the track in like two and a half years ago, and it's obviously taken a long time to release the track, but that can be a blessing, I think, because in that long waiting period, you learn so much technically about how to produce the music better, and so when it does come around to that time when you're finally making final tweaks and final mixdowns, you can apply a lot more of what you've learned over the last period of time, and you can make a much better version of the track, in my opinion. So yeah, there is a plus to waiting quite a while for the tracks to come out. Cool. So here's the final project for Lost in You. You can see that the swirling pad runs throughout the track. Let's put on the mastering so that you guys can hear that. So here's the swirling pad using Alchemy. And quite a lot of over-the-top automation, probably. It just created quite an interesting sound, really. Like gave it movement and kept it transforming and developing throughout the track. So that was it, sort of the underpinning droney background bit. It's moving, it's panning left and right, which you'll see a lot of the sounds are in this track. But just to keep the stereo image of the track interesting for the listener, I use tremolo to do this in Logic. And sort of normally every 4 bars, it's automatically panning slowly left to right. Not 100% of the sound, but 80%. The majority of the sound is moving left to right. The pads, so it's these same chords that I used in that original draft, but using a bit more of a trancier pad sound. So I'm using Alchemy, and let's have a look at how I've processed that. So I've EQ'd it quite drastically. I've cut out a lot of the low and a lot of the high to keep it quite lo-fi and a bit more vintage sounding. Originally it sounded, if I just bypass the EQ there, it's a bit too bright, a bit too a bit too much high stuff happening there. So it just really makes it more lush sounding. And I think I've just surgically EQ'd a little bit of the resonance here that I've identified at 621 Hertz. Using Span probably. Span is such a great free tool, and I feel like it's the best spectrum analysis that sort of helps me identify these big peaky resonant frequencies in sounds if I need to address some of those in the mix down. Arpeggio was done in Sylenth. Still very much the same sound as before. The main electric piano chords that were sort of like the main theme of the original track. Obviously they are in the final version, however I've used them only in the 2 breakdown sections, and I changed the sound to like a bit more of a FM bell type sound using FM8. Same notes. And I probably wrote that melody on this Roland System 1 because there's no velocity detail in there, which worked for this sound. The sound is very dynamic already, so I've had to control it a lot. I've had to compress it quite heavily to, sort of stop it from being so wild. But some of the interesting things I've done to the sound to process it, I love to use bit crusher to give it, not to sort of really crush it, but when you pull the resolution down, it adds this nice noisiness to the sound. It gives it a bit more of a bit more high content, a bit more clarity, and makes it sound kind of analog, which I really like. Let's have a look at what the sound sounded like before. You see that lift that just comes when I add the bit crusher on there. Just rolled off low frequencies in the sound that weren't necessary. MSED, another really good free plugin. It's just added a bit more width to the sound, taken out some of the mid content. I didn't want it dead center this sound, so that's been that was a really useful little plugin to spread it slightly. And then I've compressed it. Just to control some of those dynamics of the sound. So it's quite a lot of gain reduction there, like 5 decibels. But yeah, and then we've got it's being sent to a parallel bit crusher to help it cut through the mix that little bit more. So that bit crusher's probably got, it's got a lot of drive. So that is just helping it poke through the mix a bit. I really like to do that sort of thing with different distortions and compressors as well for parallel compression. And then we've got Valhalla Shimmer, which is providing the main big reverb on the sound. Pads filtering in here with Volcano, which I use for all of my filtering, just bringing that high end in. These atmospheric sort of pads were present in the original mix as well. Using Alchemy, and I've just got one that's really far left, and then the other one hits really far right, and yeah, they just help underpin some of the atmosphere of the track. What else have we got? The vocal, obviously. So, actually, let's go to the lead. So, here's the lead. The lead was created in Diva. This is what the sound used to sound like. I liked it, had some potential to it, but I think it's definitely got much more interesting with the processing I put on it. So I'll have a look at some of that. So it's got some bit crusher on there. Again, to give it that, I love that resolution, that lift that this adds to sounds. So there's a bit of that, bit of delay using Soundtoys Echo Boy Jr. Nice 8th note dotted rhythm with quite a lot of feedback on it. The magic comes from Effect Rack, and I've been able to design a little setup there. Let's take it off. To give it a real stuttered, gated sound, and it makes it really punchy and snappy. I really like it. We've got some EQ. Again, just cut out some of the resonant frequencies in the sound. Cut out the low that's not necessary. This is a really useful plugin. I have to do a shout out to my friend Weston, also known as Wasu, for this plugin. Particularly this air gain and this airband section of the plugin. It really adds a nice lift and helps leads and vocals and bits sort of help poke out and cut out the mix that little bit nicer. It adds a little bit of extra harmonics in those areas to help bring clarity to the sound. So here is that in the mix, without and with. It's just subtle changes, but it really adds something overall to the track. Some tremolo, just gradually this sound is panning slightly left to right, 50% depth, so most of the, like 50% of the sound is central, and the other 50 is just slowly moving every 2 bars. And then I've limited the sound to just catch some of the craziness here. Like you can sort of see in Pro L, the majority of the sound is sort of existing under 6 dB here, and there is these spikes that go louder, and so I've just sort of used this limiter to drastically control the sound. It does bring a bit of a distortion, but it was like a nice character for the sound rather than a negative distortion, in my opinion. So I do this a lot. This might be, I'd say take this with a grain of salt if you are a expert producer watching this, and I am butchering my sounds by doing this. I really appreciate if you could just drop me a message and let me know. But this has been a really effective way for me to control some of these wild sounds where even a compressor is not quite doing the job as I'd like. Finally, this sound is being sent to Valhalla Shimmer for my big washy reverb. So there's that. Let's move on to the vocal. So the vocal is me. Lost in you. I've got a little condenser microphone, nothing special. I love to do these little short phrases. Here's what it sounded like without the processing. Lost in you. Gemma's decided that she wanted to say something also in the video. Sorry about that. So yeah. There's my vocal, dry without any processing. A little bit of pitch correction there. It was pretty much in tune. I'm using Logic's pitch correction, which there's obviously better ones out there. I've not really sought to spend a lot of money on something like Melodyne. I think Logic's flex pitch probably would do a better job than this as well, to be fair, but I'm just so used to working with this. I love just tapping in the notes, the exact notes of the melody of the vocal that I want, and then just playing with the response time, and that sort of does the job, I think, for a lot of the stuff I'm doing, because it's simple vocal phrases rather than full-blown verse, chorus sort of thing. Using Ozone's dynamic compression, multi-band compression, just to tighten up the vocal a little bit. Compressing it to control dynamics. It was pretty. The way I recorded it was pretty. It wasn't too dynamic, to be fair, to start with, but it's certainly compressed now with the Renaissance compressor by Waves. This is a great plugin by Infected Mushroom. It's a free plugin called Wider. It does what it says on the tin. It adds stereo image to the sound, and it does it in quite a mono-friendly way, so I've been told. I've certainly not noticed any problems with phasing when I've been using this plugin. So yeah, I've just added a little bit of extra width to the vocal with Wider. You literally just turn this up. It's the most simple plugin in the world. And then Soundtoys PsyQ. I am not, if I'm honest, not entirely sure what this plugin does, but what it did do, what I heard that it did to the sound is it sort of centralized it a bit, it brought it forward in the mix, and I think it probably does a similar thing to MSED that I showed you earlier by Voxengo, but I'm not 100% sure. But I just looked through presets and this one made the sound better. So here it is with that. So it just brought the sound forward and made it nice and crystal clear and up front. So really liked using that. Here's Mag EQ4 once again in action, giving it a bit of high-end lift. This really does add something special to the vocal. Some delay. And then we've got two reverbs. We've got this reverb send. I normally have two reverb sends on each track. I'll have like a really long washed out ambient reverb, which I use Valhalla Shimmer for. And then I'll have quite a big but short sustaining reverb, and I use Logic Space Designer for that. And so this is what that reverb is like. So it's quite short decay on it. It's quite a big sound, so it adds like a nice upfront presence to the sound. And then we've got Shimmer, which it's not actually sending. There's not a huge tail on it afterwards, but it does set it a little bit back, make it a bit more dreamy. So I really liked what Shimmer was doing to the sound there. So that's most of the mids discussed. Some of the ad-libs were done by a friend of mine called Leo Wood. You'll hear more of her soon. I've got 2 collaborations with her that are coming out. She very kindly made some ad-libs for this track, which just took it to another level, in my opinion. So here's one of them. Similar sort of processing to what I've done on the vocal. Panned slightly left, lots of reverb. This one's going to be panned right. With the same processing, lots of reverb, lots of delay to keep it, like a lot of feedback on the delay to keep it going for much longer. Yeah, and then there's various other ad-libs in the track. Cool. I think let's talk about the kick and bass line, and then we'll come on to the drums. So I'm using battery for my kick drum. The kick drum is, as I've mentioned before, in the Eric Luttrell remix I did, I like to try and keep things simple. I try not to layer kicks. I have found best results from just using one really good kick sample. Sometimes I'll layer in some low end, like another kick with a big, like an 808 with a big sustain to it. I'll pitch that in tune with the track, and then I'll use Volume Shaper to sort of envelope the attack out of that kick, because the attack's provided by this kick. But in this case, I didn't feel like I needed to do that. I liked the punchiness of this kick. If I play it, it fit the track perfectly. That's my ultimate goal when I'm looking for different kick samples in tracks. I'm looking for one that will fit the track pretty perfectly without much EQing and messing around with. All I've done to it is I've used gain to put it in mono to make sure it's central. It probably was central already. It's probably in mono already, but just to be on the safe side. I wasn't hearing anything stereo on it, to be fair, but doesn't hurt. I've rolled off the frequencies under 25 Hertz. Now, I am aware that there could be some debate on this. My logic is that the human ear, club systems, car stereos, iPhones, whatever, they're not really going to be able to reproduce frequencies under 30 hertz. And however, those frequencies are present in the mix, and they're taking up space in the mix. So I just think they're unnecessary, cut them out. So I've cut out frequencies under 25 hertz here on the kick drum. I've done that on my bass line. I've done that on pretty much every sound in the mix. I've cut out unnecessary low end that is present. It's really important actually to check some of the drums, because some like shaker loops and stuff, they'll have like a low end to them that is quite hard to hear, but it's taking up space in the mix. So that's my kick drum. Here's my bass line. I've designed the bass line on my System 1, but controlling Roland's SH2. Absolutely love this plugin. I've used it on so many tracks. I just find it so convenient to hands-on build the patch that I'm looking for. I like to keep the bass simple. It's largely just one oscillator with a second oscillator here, giving a little bit of noise, which just adds a bit of bite to the sound and a bit of extra clarity. But yeah, it's snappy envelopes. I'm using a envelope to slightly modulate the cutoff frequency, so it gives it a nice little attack, little bite to the sound. So that's the bass line. Let's go through how I've processed the bass. Turn off everything. This is what it sounds like originally. Oh, hello. Here we go. That's how it sounds originally. So once again, it's in mono. Here's how I've EQ'd it. I've rolled off the frequencies under 25 hertz. I've used span to make a note of where the kick drum hits in the mix. So it's sort of hitting the main fundamental frequency of the sound is around 64, 65. I have cut that out from my bass line to give some extra space there, using a 4 dB reduction on the gain and a 4Q, so it's quite a narrow band for the kick. I am cutting out some of the mid-low end to the sound. When I sent this track out for feedback, some friends told me to be careful with the mids. They were quite present before, so I cut them back, using my ears mainly, and just finding areas which help the bass sort of sit better into the mix. Okay, we then have Waves' Manny Triple D. This is a pretty simple multi-band compressor, and I just love it for this deboxy part of it, and you only use it subtly, but it sort of takes out any muddy soundingness to the bass line. From my experience, it makes it a bit more clear in the mix and punchy. I try and avoid using this on the whole low end because it can make kicks sound a bit psytrance. So if you're trying to go for a psytrance sound, then it might be worth doing that. But so I love this little plugin. Echo Boy Jr. Just to give a little bit of nice stereo to the bass, with the bulk of the sound obviously being mono and central in the mix, but a little bit of extra interest going on there with some delay. Now, this is where, again, I call out to you, guru, Meister producers. If I'm butchering my sound by doing this, please tell me. But this seems to really work for me in controlling sound. What I'm doing, what I often notice is you will see that the bass line, every note is the same velocity. Every note is the same length. However, each bass note has a different weight, a different loudness. And I want each bass note to have the same loudness and the same weight. And so the way I've achieved that is with a limiter. And it's an extreme way to achieve it. I could have compressed the sound, but I literally just want every note to have the same weight. So I want a brick wall. I don't want any sounds getting past the threshold. So what I've done is I've made a note of the lowest hitting bass notes. Which is the first section here. And I noticed that it was coming up to about minus 16 dB. So I've set my output at minus 16 dB, boosted what's being missed in the rest of the track, another 16 dB here. I'm using a look ahead about 1.6, not really touching the attack and release, transparent style, and 4 times oversampling. And that sort of minimizes some of the distortion that comes from doing this. But yeah, you can see it's just there's only sort of a 2 dB reduction going on here, but I can now sleep easy knowing that all my bass notes hit with the same weight. So again, take that with a grain of salt, and please tell me if I'm butchering sounds doing this. This is crucial. I mentioned volume shaper earlier on when I was talking about layering a kick drum, but in this case I'm using it to do a traditional sidechain pumping. And what I love about volume shaper is it's a little feature down the bottom here that you can split the frequencies that get affected by the sidechaining. I just wanted my low end to be pumped, so I've split it at 200 hertz. Now the reason I've done this is because the bass line, if you notice, it hits at the same time that the kick drum hits, and that is part of the groove and the rhythm that I wanted for the bass line. Now the trouble with that is when the bass and the kick hit at the same time, you get this big spike in frequency content in the mix, and it just makes mastering, mixing a nightmare. And so I want the mid part of the bass to come through, which is not necessarily gonna cause that big bass spike, but the part of the bass that is the low end, that is going to get pumped in the normal way that you'd expect with sidechain compression. So that's being pumped there 100%. Oh, the whole thing's, yeah, the low end's getting pumped 100%, and the mid range comes through. Now I could have sidechained the whole sound, but I want that groove. I want that note that hits at the same time as the kick. So that's why volume shaper is really cool. So I've been able to do it like that. The volume shaper, this technique was such a great solution. I discovered it and I've been using it for a long time now. I discovered it when I was making my Above and Beyond remix for Counting Down the Days. That has a bass line that hits at the same time as the kick drum. I wanted to retain that groove, that rhythm. And so volume shaper was an excellent solution to do that. So that is most of the bass line summed up really. There's a little bit of FabFooter Volcano, which is just being used to filter out the bass towards the end of the track. I use this plugin for all filtering that I do in every different channel. It's important to make sure that you've got it on the clean mode. And I sometimes just boost the peak of it slightly, maybe up to like 0.2, which just helps bring out those lower frequencies when you've got quite far filtered out. But yeah, love this plugin. And then gain, I'm just automating that slightly in the breakdown to help give it a bit more impact when it comes in. So that's the bass line, kick and bass together, sound like this. Now I've sent the kick and bass to their own channel where I have rolled off low end under 25 hertz just to make sure none of those frequencies are coming through. I am compressing the guys together with I'm aiming for like between 1 and 2 dB of gain reduction, with quite a quick attack to catch those transients, but not enough to butcher the kick drum. So it's allowing some of the attack to come through at the kick before it's kicking in, and quite a snappy release there. So it's using Waves our comp, filtering those guys in the breakdown, again with Volcano, and then limiting. Again, this is where I need you guru or production meister to step in here and let me know if I'm butchering my sounds doing this. But limiting has been, yeah, I already discussed this on the baseline, I think. So ignore this part of the video. Yeah, I've limited the kick in the bass. I've made note of where the kick is hitting. I've set my threshold there, and then I can rest assured that any sort of spiking in the low end is going to be controlled. It's going to be kept back, and the kick drum is still like the driving force in the low end. There's more that could be said on the low end, but that's a very ballpark overall way of to sort of, in a nutshell, show what I'm doing. Some of that channel is being sent to a parallel distortion. My favourite distortions I'm using are Soundtoys Devil Lock, Soundtoys Decapitator, and Logic's Bit Crusher. I do like Logic's Overdrive as well, but in this case I'm sending some of the low end just a little bit. It's really subtle, but it's going. It does add extra bite. Let's have a look if we can hear that. It's really, really subtle. But it's another one of those small changes when all together, overall in the mix, they really do add something. And then we've got some parallel compression going on there. I'm using a Waves compressor with a really punchy, extreme compression setting, and so the idea behind parallel compression is you're getting a majority of the raw sound, and then you're getting a portion of that really compressed signal, so that adds a bit of extra bite and punch to the mix. So that is the low end, and now let's move on to talking about the drums. You'll notice, and I've probably mentioned this in my Latrell video as well, but I love to have all of my drums in MIDI. The reason for this is for extra control, I think for extra quality, and the reason I say that is I love to take different drum audio loops. I love to bring them into the mix, and I could just time stretch them, but this sometimes brings this really granular quality to the sound. It like degrades the quality of the drums. So what I like to do is Logic has this built-in feature where you can take an audio loop. Logic will detect all of the different drum hit transients within the loop. It will then cut all of those out, make them into their own audio files, and put them into an EXS24 sampler instrument. For example, these drum breaks, that is exactly what I've done. Drum breaks come at like 170 BPM because they're used predominantly in drum and bass. Well, that's where I got these guys. And instead of just time stretching this, I've used Logic's convert to new sampler track. I think it's the official method in Logic, and I think you can do this in Ableton. You can probably do it in most DAWs, but you can see how it's put it into EXS24. Now I can trigger each of these sections on my keyboard if I want to, or I can use the piano roll to mess it around and cut stuff out. Like, oh, I've already got my own snare, like let's cut that out, rather than cutting out of the audio. I can just cut it out of here, and then I can use the envelope within EXS24 to make it really snappy. So let's have a look at what that used to sound like. If I just turn these guys off quick. Sample used to sound like this. And then with just playing with that decay there, really nice and snappy now and punchy. yeah, I wanted this to sound quite lo-fi, so I cut the lows out, make it sound like it's coming down a telephone or something. Rolled off some of those, the high end, the brightness to it. Volume shaper, so it's not interfering with the kick. Just pumping it 100%, the whole sound's pumping on the kick drum. Little bit of delay. Some Pro Q here, like if you can see, there's these massive spikes in this sound, and the bulk of the loop is being provided by this nice delicate content here. And I probably could have brought that limiter down even more, but yeah, it's got these spiky bits. I wanted to control the limiter. Being sent to that big Space Designer reverb that we talked about earlier, and some of it's being sent to the Devil Lock parallel distortion. So that's how I've sort of processed that. The drums, yeah, so there you go. So I've got all of the drums in MIDI. The majority of the drums are being triggered in battery, which is like my favourite sampler of choice. I use this for like the more like core sounds, and then a lot of the more atmospheric drum sounds are provided from cutting up loops and stuff in EXS24. Here's a snare. Lovely, like punchy, tight snare drum. It's monoed to keep it central in the mix. I've rolled off unnecessary low end under 120 hertz. The kick, that snare was great, but as the track got going, I felt it was a bit too quick. It needed a bit more sustain, and so I found another snare sample. You see that? It just carries it like to that next kick drum, and the way I've done that is found a really sustaining, like quite a long sustaining snare from like a disco sample pack, I believe, and then I've used this from Native Instruments, this transient master, which has just added even more length to the sound. So before, let's take off the processing of this. Really add some sustain to that sound, and we've made it a bit wider. We've bit crushed it. We've rolled out unnecessary low end. The sound was mono initially, just to control any stereo that was in the initial sample, and then I'm adding my own width to it with wider. And this is the key element here, is the volume shaper. And I mentioned this briefly on kick drums. I sometimes do this to add in a low sustaining part of a kick drum. More recently, I'm using kick 2, and I like to build the sine part of the kick myself, and I can then add as much sustain to it as I want, and it's really clean. But back in the day, like 2 months ago, this is how I was always doing it. But for a snare, yeah, I'm sort of I've built my own slow attack here, and then it runs off, and because I don't need the attack provided from this part, I just want the tail, and because the attack's being provided by this snare, so together they sound like that, and they, as you can tell, did add like real movement to the groove. I thought it was necessary. Next up, open hat. Mono, central in the mix. I like that for like the main drum elements in like in a house tune. Your like, your low end, and then you've got snare, open hat, for that classic house groove. I quite like those guys to be in the middle like of the track as they're driving the bulk of the tune, and then I've got other bits that I can use, like the Haas effect, subtly different widening things to create, and like panning to bring stereo to the track. So there's some widers being used there to bring some width to the ride cymbal. The harsh effect using sample delay on those 16-note closed hats. Same thing for the tambourines. And then this break is panned slightly right. This break's panned slightly left. And then I've got a little 909 snare and a side stick which goes the other way with the 707. All of the drums are being sent to their own channel, where I've rolled off unnecessary low end. I've compressed them. I've gone for about 1 to 2 dB of gain reduction here. A bit of a longer attack so that it allows those transients to come through before compression takes place and butchers transients. Sometimes if the high end's really, really sharp and bright on a track, and sometimes I'll try and butcher some of the transients to help control some of that harshness. But in most of the time, I like to allow the transients to shine through. And then, a bit of it's being sent to the parallel compression we've talked about. Some of it's being sent to the parallel devil lock. And that is the drums. And that is most of the track summed up, really. Oh, hello. That came through. 2 snare rolls. We've got an 808, which is quite wide, and then we've got this 909, which filters in slightly slower, I think, and just adds extra depth to that snare roll. So that, guys, is Lost in You. Hopefully that's been informative and helpful. Hopefully there's some little nuggets in there for you to pick up different techniques and apply stuff to your own work. Hopefully that was good. I do invite you to drop me a message, drop a comment. I'll try and get back to you if you've got any questions or would like to hear a little bit more about how I've done a certain thing in the track that I've missed in my waffling, my rambling. And otherwise, please do come and drop me a follow on my socials. I'm at Marsh Musician on pretty much everywhere. So please come and say hi over there. I'd love to connect with you. And until the next release, guys, I'll speak to you soon.